Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for making time. I hope you're having all a great time and had some fantastic keynotes that you've enjoyed thoroughly. In this session, we're going to talk to you about why AWS may offer you the best way to run your 5G network, your 5G environment. With me in today's session, we'll have the EVP of Switchcom, Mr. Mark Tusner, as well as one of my colleagues, Nitz Jagannathan, who's a Senior Product Manager at AWS for Snow Services. So without further ado, about myself, Amir Rao. I am the Director of Product Management at AWS. I started with AWS 6 years ago, more than 6 years ago, really focused on the telco infrastructure, working with the telco operators around the world. And I'll walk you through, in a way, our journey of where we've landed today. So let's look at some of the customer challenges when you talk about 5G. When you talk about 5G, you're talking about two different customer personas. One is the operator themselves. We've got good representation, and Mark Tusner, he will probably speak to that, the challenges that they face. When operators build 5G to serve the needs of enterprises, what are they thinking? Why are they pushed to build the 5G networks? They have to build a cloud because by inherent design, a 5G network is a virtualized network. They have to maintain the network. They have to worry about the day two operations. They have to worry about the automation, the CI/CD, the network assurance, all of those things which previously they used to get in a black box with 3 or 4 lights, red, green, blue, yellow, and the color of the lights would tell them whether the network is working or the network node is running or not. Life is much more complicated because 5G brings us a lot of possibilities, but it also brings a lot of complexity. Because by virtualized nature of it, you are breaking down the stack, which is giving you the enormous amount of opportunity to bring in new services, but then at the cost of complexity. The second customer persona is the enterprises. You've heard about possibilities that 5G will unlock across IoT, augmented reality, connected vehicles, network slicing. What does it mean? It means that an enterprise customer, be it a pharmaceutical industry, be it an automotive industry player, be it a manufacturing industry player, they would want to create and get connectivity on demand. And they have their own challenges. They're worried about connectivity, they're worried about security and data sovereignty, integration and support. They want to be able to experiment fast. And these are their challenges. They want to have faster time to market because, well, Industry 4.0, it will unlock enormous potential, but they want to experiment fast. So these are two distinct set of challenges when we talk about customer personas and customer challenges that we are trying to help solve for. Now, let's take a step back. AWS. This is a slide we've used enormously in multiple forums. I believe it was introduced by our former CEO and Amazon CEO, Andy Jassy, and a lot of our execs. The AWS Cloud to Edge Continuum. Many years ago, not many, 10 years ago, we were only known to exist in AWS Availability Zone, our public cloud infrastructure. Massive, large, huge data centers. And we still believe all workloads that could run based on their latency requirements, based on their data residency requirements that could run on public cloud are AWS regions, should run in AWS regions, because that is where you get maximum cost benefit. Then we've slowly, gradually moved further down to the edge. AWS Outposts, AWS Storage Gateways, these are services that you've known over the years, dating back to 2018, 2019 timeframe. Then in metro centers, we launched AWS Local Zones, our CDN network. And then, of course, the AWS, last year we announced AWS P5G, which is a private 5G connectivity service. We've also, for the last 6 or 7 years, we've been continuously innovating in the domain of IoT and robotics. We've got AWS IoT complete ecosystem, the Greengrass, the RoboMaker. And then we've also built and expanded on the ruggedized edge, which is our Snow family of services, which dates back to, and Nitz, who is a co-speaker today, will go into the details, but essentially that gives you to get the benefit of cloud in a remote location without being even connected to the cloud. So with this continuum of services, whether you want to have a ruggedized device, whether you want to have a connected IoT, whether you want to go into the metro data center, the on-prem, down to the cloud availability zone or AWS public regions, you have a continuum of services. This, what does it mean in the context of a telco network, in context of 5G? This is probably the most important question that you guys are asking. And this slide will show you what it means, because it has laid out how a 5G network can be rolled out and different components or network functions or network applications of that 5G requisite network will actually be hosted in different locations based on the latency profiles, based on the user plane requirements, based on the data residency requirements. As you can see, you can have potentially all of your 4G and 5G core, along with OSS, BSS, everything, the control plane, everything actually could run in a region. And this is a huge shift for the industry. This is a huge shift because here we are changing the paradigm of telco networking. This is based on cloud networking, software-defined networking. This is no longer dependent on bare metal NIC cards. And that's a substantial shift that we are taking together with the help of our customers like Swisscom, as well as our industry ecosystem partners like Ericsson and Nokia and so many others. And then you move down to the AWS Outposts where all of the traffic aggregation points, traditional MPLS networks, IP MPLS networks, traditional traffic aggregation points where you aggregate all the traffic and bring it all. This is where you're going to run on either an AWS Outpost, in an operator's data center, or in a customer data center, or in an AWS local zone. But essentially, you're processing the traffic. What are you doing? You're processing the traffic closer to the end user so that you're not incurring the backhaul cost. And because 5G by inherent nature, if there's one thing that's going to grow in 5G, that's traffic. So if the traffic is going to grow, you want to minimize the traffic that you're bringing to a centralized location. And that is how you're going to build the resilience and the redundancy and the availability of the network. That is why you'd have multiple locations. That has been a cornerstone of our strategy from a 5G infrastructure perspective. And then you go right at the end, you see three different categories. You could actually have a public network RAN, radio access network. We announced the 2U servers. We've talked about it in the past. You can have a dedicated public network. You could have a public network, which could be a 4G, 5G public network. And then you could actually even run a private network for an enterprise. Now, this private network could be provided by an operator, like a Swisscom, or this private network could actually be provided by a third-party ISV. Regardless, and we at AWS, we offer multiple choices. If you want to build something ruggedized in the middle of nowhere, excuse me, Nits, but probably, let's say, an offshore rig, you want to build a private network environment, what do? You use Snow services. If you want to have any kind of a legislative requirement where you need to isolate intermittently, what do? You use Snow services. You want to completely, continuously get all the time connected to the cloud, you use an Outpost server, a 2U server, a 1U server, or for that matter, an Outpost rack. So this offers you the complete picture of how a 5G network, whether it's an enterprise customer or an operator customer, how are we at AWS meeting all of their requirements across the value chain of their business, whether it is OSS, whether it's BSS, whether it's billing, whether it is network workload, and across the topology of the network, whether it is user plane, whether it is control plane, whether it is radio network, whether it is the last mile access network. And that's a key point. Now, at this slide, there is one takeaway I want to leave you with. Just one. Everything else, I'm sure you've taken pictures, this session is getting recorded, you'll have access to it. The takeaway here is, if you look at this slide, there is a general industry message. Cloud is becoming part of cost of goods sold for 5G. It's no longer an SG&A entry in the P&L. For those of you with business background would understand and appreciate the difference. So telco industry vertical is probably the only vertical where there's a substantial shift, because connectivity today is a function of three things. Some physical assets, fiber, towers, civil buildings, some software, and then some virtualization environment. And that virtualization need is what we are solving for across the value chain of the business and across the topology of the network. And that's an important message I want all of you to take. The cloud is part of COGS for telco industry. It's no longer an SG&A entry. That is why it's important to really think deep and through what are we trying to achieve. I'll breeze through some of the next slides. Why we have come up with this common cloud continuum. Because we believe if cloud is part of COGS, then you would want to have a common architecture. You cannot have 5 different type of application designs and architectures, 2 different teams, 3 different CI/CD methodologies. You can't afford to do that, because that is going to add on to the complexity. So that is why the key ISVs, the key AWS partners who are working with us in this domain, they would want to have a common architecture. They would want to have a reliable, secure cloud services. They want to have the same ownership model, same APIs, same CloudWatch, same CloudTrail, services that you've been used to, same tools for automation, for CI/CD, code deploy, code build, all of these pipelines, and same pace of innovation. They don't want to be hostage to innovation at edge, which is always a step function based on what you innovate in public cloud. So essentially, these are the key requirements from our CSPs, the telco customers, and the telco incumbents, independent software providers, the Amdocs, the Nokias, the Ericssons, the Samsungs of the world. So essentially, if you now break it down, why should you run BSS and OSS on AWS? It's a very simple answer. Forget this slide. You can build new services, but you need to be able to build them. One thing is building new services, the other thing is billing for new services. So if you cannot build the new services, and if your BSS has the same legacy design of application and architecture, you're done, you're toast. So this has been our journey over the last 6 years, as we've learned through the pains of the telco industry and trying to help our customers. Agility doesn't mean how fast you can build. Agility means how fast you can introduce a service to the market. What is your time to monetization? And that time to monetization is an important feature of OSS BSS, and that is what we provide. Of course, with the resilience and scalability and the growth and scalability, and you can test, you can really go slow, you can test easily, you have the low cost of entry and minimal time to market. All of these are important things, but essentially, the message here is you can build, but you need to be able to bill. You need to be able to serve your customer, which is where the OSS comes in. These are the 2 reasons why BSS and OSS should run on AWS. Why 5G core on AWS? As I said, 5G core is like my heart. A process, just like my heart pumps all the blood going into my body, 5G core pumps all the traffic ever that is generated by each and every mobile handset in a mobile network. It goes through the 5G core, then comes out, either goes to the internet or goes to somebody somewhere else that it is destined to. And if there is one thing that's going to happen in the 5G, the historical trend is we have seen 10x growth in 4G. Who knows what number of X growth are we going to see in 5G? So if that's really the case, would you want to keep on planning for capacity? No. You would want to benefit from the agility of cloud, the mass capacity pools that the public cloud infrastructure provides, the operational resilience that it provides, and hence the business agility that you want to aim for. Then the next question is, okay, BSS, OSS, 5G core, why RAN? And once again, I'd like to beg your attention to the issue of complexity. 5G, you are really running virtualized networks. And you virtualize even the last mile access, the radio access network, between the CU and the DU workloads. And even for the DU workload, you're all of a sudden now dealing, previously you used to have one box, now you have at least 4 stack layers. You got some COT server, you got some virtualization platform, you got some Kubernetes environment, and then you got the application. And then you have to deal with all of these 4 players to actually ensure where something can potentially go wrong. And there are ways around it, but I think one of the benefits that AWS brings to this fray is, with our AWS Outposts and some other services, we can provide the single pane of glass from an infrastructure perspective. And we are already working with our ISV partners, some of them public and the key suspects, the big heavyweights of the industry. We are already working with them to ensure that how can we offer the performance of a traditional radio, but with the operational simplicity that is requisite of public cloud, and that we can offer. Moving beyond RAN, we announced AWS Wavelength, which is the low latency compute services. And if you look at the schematic, you're talking about, once again, connecting. The whole mental model has been that the machine learning model will actually get trained in the public cloud because there you can store tons and tons of data at very low cost. But you want to execute it to the edge. That is why you need the continuum. That is why you need the continuum. And that is where AWS Wavelength services, which are embedding cloud compute and networking into a CSP or a telco data center, has been key. It's essentially not really a multi-tenants hybrid cloud play. This is our answer to the next generation of use cases, the immersive experience use case. What will unlock consumer immersive experiences when we would actually, when like fast forward 5 years from now, there'll still be few of us in reInvent in person, but there'll be a lot of people with AR, VR headsets sitting in their own comfort of their own place, and they would be able to enjoy that. Those are the use cases that would get enabled by the AWS Wavelength. So the autonomous vehicle and all of that. So necessary conditions are mobility. This is really, really important. Mobility, some dependency on the application on the attribute of 5G attribute, of network attribute. And hence, of course, the application that could benefit from leveraging the public cloud infrastructure and services across as the edge compute. Now, we've talked about a lot of these. This is pretty self-explanatory. This just talks about some of the use cases that 5G enables, whether it's metro centers and, we've got a ruggedized edge, we are on-prem, we've got POPs. The point here is on the right-hand side, which is the breadth in the continuum, the regional infrastructure, the availability zone infrastructure, the points of presence that AWS has, the edge locations, and in addition to the edge locations, the fact that we have AWS Outposts that you can deploy on your own edge on demand. The fact that we have got Snow services that you can deploy on edge on demand. Everything else, so it caters for the full spectrum of cloud services for all 5G needs. Now, we've heard a lot about the second. Now, let's talk about the second persona, the enterprise customer who want to benefit from private 5G, from secure connectivity for their application. We announced AWS P5G, but that's not the only thing. That's not the only innovation AWS. It's a fully AWS managed services, but that is not the only innovation that we deliver. In fact, a major part of our innovation focus is actually on partner solutions, whether it is the likes of Swisscom and other operators who've been public, who have been working with us to deliver the private 5G or private wireless environment for their enterprise customers in their own backyard, depending on which part of the world they are. Nitsch is going to talk to you about some of those references and use cases. Or it is the ISVs, the software vendors, the private network providers, the likes of JMA Wireless, the Mavenairs, the Nokias, and other ISVs who are directly providing these networks to the enterprise customers. The common theme here is, first and foremost, we are a cloud provider. And we are meeting the virtualization infrastructure requirement needs. I'll go back to the one point I just remember. For 5G, cloud is cogs. You can't work without cloud. And that is what the role that we want to play, that we want to help our customers, our partners to deliver on the value, on the promise of 5G. So now let's just double click on the partner solutions. So what kind of partner solutions do we have? Once again, there are two types of partner solutions. Those that can leverage AWS Outposts and, of course, our operator partners, once again, the telecom operators around the world, they've been leveraging that. And, of course, the work that we are doing with ISVs, both of them can actually leverage, whether it's an AWS Outpost or the AWS EC2 Edge services or AWS Snow family of services to deliver the private wireless environment. Now, this was a quick rundown on technology and all the building blocks that we have. Let's come down to what does it all mean, because this is where it all culminates, the different success stories, the work, and these are all public references. With Telenor, where we've built a private wireless environment in Thailand using Snow services. I believe it's an offshore use case. Yeah. And then we've got JMA Wireless, who's a premier partner, a technology partner, who have announced a 5G core network in a box using Snow services. Telefonica, who's built for one of the largest auto manufacturers in the world, they built a private wireless environment using AWS Outpost. We've got Spark New Zealand, who've just tested both the private wireless as well as the public 5G core. And then, of course, you've all heard about Dish, sitting in US. They're running their entire 5G network on AWS. And it's a public network. And I'd like to now quickly talk about Swisscom, which is really a flagship AWS customer. We've just announced AWS region in Switzerland, and we are very privileged to actually be partnering with Swisscom in their internal and external transformation, both from a B2B and B2C perspective, as well as their internal transformation across IT and network. And with that, I would also like to introduce Mark Tusner, who's the EVP of Mobile Networks and Services at Swisscom. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Samir. From my side as well. So we heard about all the components that are already available, the components of the future that are available today. It's about us making that next step towards the future, and that is what I call our journey from telco to TechCo. Swisscom obviously is a telco. We are, I would say, one of the best mobile network operators in the world. I have to say that. I'm leading that team. And therefore, we are quite telco. So the start of our 5G journey started like all journeys started in telco, driven by speed and capacity first. That was the first promise of 5G. And that's how we started. We've been the first offering 5G live commercially in Europe in April 2019. And we've been very, very fast. At the end of 2019, we already had 90% population coverage. And as of today, that's not on the slides, we've got 99.9 5G coverage in Switzerland. So, big step forward, right? But that's not future, that's today. And the good of today isn't the good of tomorrow. So what do we need to change? The real transformation of 5G is something that I often say is under the hood. It's under the hood like the revolution we've seen in the car industry. A Tesla and at least a former BMW, they look kind of alike, depends on taste. But they both have wheels, they've got doors, they've got a steering wheel, right? But the real difference is under the hood. It's the engine, and even more important, it's how this engine is steered and powered, that software. And the same revolution is happening in the telco industry. And the key ingredients from our side on that journey are four: simplification, cloud nativeness, automation, and last but not least, even more or most important, our people and culture. So let me drill into these four topics quickly. What do we do with simplifications? First of all, we celebrate them. We have a party each year, a phase-out party. We nominate the queen or king of phase-outs for the year as we celebrate wins in network testing. Why do we do that? Because we want to make optimal use of our scarcest resources. And as a mobile network operator, that's typically spectrum and frequency and power that we can apply. Therefore, we as Swisscom phased out 2G, and we're about to phasing out 5G. We're about to phase out MMS. We're about to phase out a couple of other topics. The other one, obviously, we reduced cost just by that, and can use that money to invest into innovation. But I think the latter 2 points are even the most important ones, which is we create new space for the teams to focus on the innovation, to foster it. And last but not least, that sounds a bit maybe even silly, but simplicity is simpler. Let me give you an example. As of today, we have a virtual data core, and we have multiple instances. And each instance does have a number, does have an IP plan that is written somewhere on paper, digitally. So the IP addresses are known, the VLANs are known, and so on. That's complex. That's something you need to document, you need to look into, You need to do capacity planning, as we've heard. In tomorrow's world, this will be done by the environment, right? We don't care how many instances we need. The environment will take care of it depending on the capacity necessary, and will include, obviously, connectivity, firewall routes, and rules, and so on. And that's simpler from an engineering perspective. So the next ingredient is getting rid of boxes, or true cloud nativeness. Telco business used to be a box business. We heard about that, the 4 lights Amir mentioned. And then we were pretty proud that we went into virtualization, but in the end, we still have boxes, just virtual boxes. And the real differentiation part of it is what I just said, right? We still plan for it. We treat them as pets instead of kettles. And we don't do cloud nativeness because it's sexy, because it sounds good, or is religious or religion. We do it because it provides a lot of operational benefits if we are able to do that. We will do tests in production. I mean, a typical failure case has always been that we tested anything in lab, it worked well, we moved it to production and it failed. So test in production, no lab anymore, is something we will gain with cloud nativeness. And we get rid of the myth of the 5 nines. 5 nines is a typical telco myth. That's 3 minutes failure in a year. Nobody has achieved that, I would say, really. Instead, we aim for what is known as everything that can fail will fail, quote of Werner Vogels. So we treat things differently. We embrace failure, and we embrace especially failovers. True elasticity. Capacity planning, as we've heard, is something we're doing. We're quite good at it. We optimized it. But the necessary investment we have, we can't optimize to above a certain extent. Why is that? Simply because the elasticity that's necessary throughout the day, at least in our case, is a factor of 8. The lowest traffic somewhere in the morning at 5 o'clock to the highest traffic, the peak in the day, is a factor of 8. With a private cloud, you aim for the factor of 8. That's not efficient. And nevertheless, it's a journey. So with some workloads, we have fundamental issues. We have fundamental principles still missing. We still have cloud network functions that are stateful instead of stateless, so just instantiating them, or have dependencies, in which order they have to be instantiated, and so on. This is something we will need to solve as an industry, and I'm pretty sure we will. Number 3 is quality and innovation are not conflicts anymore. They're the same part, or the 2 parts of the same coin. In the past, you either increased innovation and risk and accepted some risks of failures, or vice versa. With automation in place, CI/CD pipelines in place, we will deploy much more frequent than we do today. Today, we do it maybe in core, we do it once or twice a year. And what you get is a big chunk of new features, improvements, whatever. And if anything fails, the root cause analysis is a pain. If you get that once per week, the increment is lower, therefore the quality is higher, and the speed of innovation is faster. Very simple. And the funny part, or fun fact in our case, is we're talking about software. The whole automation process that is known from IT and software, we started in the most hardware-heavy business we have that's run, it's Access. We're deploying new features into our network every second week. We're doing A/B testing on a single site. So we know the principles, we just haven't applied them yet onto what seems to be easier to be done, the cores, and that's what we want to do. It's all about processes, it's especially about ways of working. And just imagine once when I did the talk to my team and saying we get rid of the lab, it wasn't just only the lab team who was a bit of annoyed, it was all of us, because we were used to it. We need to step out of our comfort zone to make that happen. And what we will make happen is, and that refers back to the simplicity, everything is code. Take the example I mentioned early on with, for example, connectivity. Connectivity as code means once you instantiate a new instance of the core, it will call an API and get what it's necessary to get connected. And last but not least, what we started at Swisscom as an additional journey is site reliability engineering, written wrong here, in order to scale our operations. In the past, operations was separated, then we integrated that into DevOps, and still it's heavy. It's heavy weight, heavy lifting, whereas it should be much more lighter. And this is what we are aiming for by introducing site reliability engineering, so really embracing the automation of ops. And last but not least, as I've said, the most important ingredient to that journey is people and culture. So what we did is we placed the message right up front, which is everyone will become a software engineer within our team. We have been a telco department, we're becoming a software organization, and therefore everyone, to a certain extent, will become a software engineer, and everything will become code. And for that, we started a big upskilling program, hiring program. We mixed experiences and new skills. And we engaged in what everybody is facing with a different mindset. The battle of age and the war for talents, as I called it. And that helped us to understand that diversity isn't an option anymore. It's nothing that is nice to have, right? But it's something that's a necessity. We heard about the increasing complexity, and the best way to embrace complexity is by different perspectives, and diversity is helping that. And by us having people, members in the team who are about to retire, 20% of my team is about to retire in the next 5 years. That's quite a challenge. And therefore, automation is necessary. Therefore, hiring is necessary. Diversity is necessary. And in order to get there, you need to be attractive. And all the points I just made is adding on that one. And the funny part, or interesting part, is in the past, when we hired people, we had the experienced ones training them, right? As of today, they're sitting next to each other, and they're training each other. And it's tremendous to see and to watch them and to see how fast they pick up both sides. That's something I really, really enjoy on that journey. And last but not least, technology is changing team culture. Just take that example, and vice versa. So how does that relate to AWS? When we embraced the journey, we knew that we need to have a partner who can help us there, who part of that has done the journey or is kind of the synonym of that journey. And that is why we embraced our partnership with AWS. It's not about technology at all in the first place. Yes, they're perfect on that. That was known, but it was really and is really about acting as partners, having them being part of our teams to support us on that journey that I just mentioned. Learn from simplicity, cloud nativeness, and all the topics they have embraced for years, and make them happen within our industry. So what we're doing is we're aiming for bringing the 5G core into the region in Switzerland as a hybrid solution. Hybrid meaning we will have on-prem, a private cloud, and we will have the public cloud. And both will act together as a single operations. And by that, we will benefit from the managed infrastructure and services, the elasticity that I mentioned earlier on, security, and as I said as well, the innovation just by introducing all the new methods. And looking forward and looking ahead, once we have that, the benefit we get out of the box is the uniform architecture, which will enable us to transform even further. So once we have that up and running in the region, we can easily deploy that in our data centers if we want to, or in edge locations for enterprise customers or for ourselves for XR applications, whatever will come. We don't know about the innovation, but what we know is once we enable that one, we are ready to enable any innovation. And how that can look alike is something that Nils, you will talk more about.
Thanks, Mark, for sharing your information about how Swisscom is transforming from a telco company to a technology company. It sounds an exciting journey, and AWS is happy to be partnering with you, and we look forward to hearing more about it in the future. All right. Hi, my name is Nitch Jagannathan, and I'm a product manager in Snow Services team. I'm here to talk about how we are enabling private 5G in the disconnected edge using Snow Service products. Now, Amar was pretty eloquent about the cloud to edge continuum, how we offer a range of tools from all the way from the cloud to customers' disconnected edge, right? Now, for Outpost server racks, whether it's a server racks or it's servers, requires connections all the way to the cloud all the time. But there are some customers who don't have reliable connectivity or no connectivity at their edge. And they also need private 5G use cases in order for them to realize their goals. And that is where Snow comes in. So let's always start from the customer journey, right? So imagine a customer, a mining customer in a remote part in Australia. Now, they have almost no connectivity or, unreliable connectivity. But these companies also have an operational need to connect to all the folks who are operating in the mines and stay in touch so that their operations can go smoothly. Now, what do these customers need? They need a private 5G network so that they can connect to all the endpoints all over the mine. But they also need other applications. They would need a push-to-talk or some messaging applications so that they can, all the folks and the nodes can talk to each other. And they also need maybe, because these are highly, intensive applications, you would need some kind of an AI ML at the edge so that even without any connectivity back to the cloud, you can operate locally for long periods of time. And if you look at the value prop that Snow is bringing to the table, that's exactly that, right? So we are enabling, as of today, 12 AWS services on Snow devices that are pre-packaged when you order a Snow device so that you can actually bring those services to the edge. Some of these services are EC2, EKS, S3, so that let's say if you have an instance running in the cloud, you could basically move them onto a Snow device and run your application at the disconnected edge with no connectivity back to the cloud at all. Now, that's a powerful feature, right? Another powerful capability is that those AWS services are using the same APIs as the customers are used to in the cloud. So then what does that mean? That means that if you are developing an application, let's say for disconnected edge, where you'd never have any internet connections, you can develop it once in the cloud, validate it, put it on a Snow device, and let's say it's shipped to middle of nowhere, and it will still operate the same way as you would run in a cloud. Now, that is a very powerful functionality that is enabling our customers to shift left the development cycle. So it is basically time to market is faster, and you can innovate faster and experiment faster as well. Another functionality that has been resonating a lot with our customers is that we are a hardware device service, so you could always scale up or scale down depending upon your use case. For instance, let's say you're all of a sudden there is an edge traffic requirement for you to scale up to 4 Snowball Edge devices, and that's for a smaller spike, and you don't need it. You can return those devices back to AWS, so you can grow and shrink based on what your use case is requiring you to do. So that also means that less CapEx for you, and it's all operational expense while you are dealing with certain uncertain traffic. And another key tenet of Snow is that it is built secure and rugged from ground up. So our Snowball Edge devices and Snowcone devices are built rugged, and it is military spec. It has gone through rigorous testing, and we have tamper resistance and tamper evident mechanisms in there so that like if something happens on the device, we will have a mechanism to know that. Why is it important? Like these workloads, edge workloads are operating in locations far outside of your data centers. These are not in fully controlled telco data centers anymore. These are operating in mines. The access to those are quite varied. You want the peace of mind that the workload and the data that is being generated at the edge is actually secure, and there is no unauthorized access to it. And these are all the key value props that Snow brings to the table. And this is why a lot of our partners are able to use Snow products for deploying private 5G. Now that I've addressed why Snow, right? Some of you may not be familiar with Snow service and curious about what Snow service actually is. So what you see here is one of our product lines. This is a Snowball Edge. And think of it as it's a 50-pound device about the size of a carry-on suitcase, but it is packed with capabilities. It's got 104 vCPUs and up to 416 GB of RAM and up to 210 terabytes of storage. Now, depending upon your use case, you can always scale down to 32 vCPUs, and so you have that flexibility of adjusting your compute capacity. But you could, for applications who need 100 vCPUs, you could use a Snowball Edge device packed with AWS services and deploy your edge applications on top of it, right? And interestingly, there is an interesting terminology over there, airdroppable. So essentially, you customers have, especially in the government sector, they have actually tested this from dropping it from an airplane with a parachute, and the device have survived. And so it's mil-spec compatible, water resistant. You can deploy it on back of a truck, or you can hang it next to a radio tower, and it works perfectly well. So that ruggedization, especially outside of a regular data center, builds a certain peace of mind for our customers. Before we go into how our customers have deployed the architectures they have used, I wanted to spend some time on a key feature that we have enabled that is specific for private 5G customers. And we call this the direct networking interface. Think of this as a virtual routing capability that is available to you on Snow products. Now, the main reason for enabling this is that customers, especially at the edge, they have diverse networking requirements. Some of them, this is not enterprise anymore. You are in somebody else's premises. You need to have flexibility to be able to create multiple VLANs. You want to be able to handle your own routing table. All of that functionality we have enabled with this direct networking capability. Now, what this necessarily means to us is that you don't necessarily, as an edge developer, you don't have to worry about how do I manage the networking stack on my system. You have full flexibility to create your own networking mechanism and deploy it, test it, and then scale it to production. Now that we have talked about the what and the whys, so I'm going to go a little bit more detail into the how. So there are two main ways what we have seen adoption from our telco customers. One is our private 5G partners essentially deployed a two-device solution where they have an off-the-shelf commercial platform running the private 5G RAN, and they're using the Snowball Edge devices for running private 5G core and the edge applications on top of it. Right, so this is the easier deployment. They don't have to change their existing RAN stack. All they have to do is use the powerful AWS service capabilities and the edge capabilities of a Snowball Edge to realize their use case. Now, the other one, which is very interesting to us, is it's a very recent announcement and a capability, and I will dive upon it in a little bit more detail. Essentially, this is a full private 5G in a box. It includes the private 5G RAN stack. It includes a private 5G core. Along with that, there is some room for running your multi-access edge compute applications on top of it. So essentially, now you don't need to manage 2 devices to deploy a private 5G. You have a single device, a Snowball Edge device with 104 vCPUs, with the complete virtual RAN running on it. So it gives you all the flexibility that you need. So you have a single device to manage, single device to pay for, single device to scope. Everything becomes simpler for you with a single network-in-a-box solution. The first deployment model that I talked about essentially this is the 5G core only solution, where there is a RAN stack running on an off-the-shelf component, and our customers are deploying a full private 5G UPF and control plane on the Snowball Edge devices, connected to a RAN stack and the radios for deploying it in a disconnected mode. The things for managing the spectrum, the availability of the network, those things are still running in the cloud. But once a Snowball Edge device is provisioned and shipped to your location, you don't really need any connection at all after that. We have a software solution called OpsHub, which you can use to bring the system up, and you can put it on back of a truck, you can put it on a drone, you can put it on a submarine, and you have a full private 5G availability on wherever you want to go. So I wanted to touch upon how customers have some of the success stories with Snow, really, right? And this also, the key takeaway here is it's not just how they are deployed, but also the use cases that are being enabled with Snow functionality. Now, Spark is a perfect example of that. Spark in New Zealand wanted to bring AI/ML at the edge for a specific Environ New Zealand customer. This is a waste management customer who is looking for identification of hazardous work environment for their workers. Now, because most of the waste management locations are far outside the city, the network connections are unreliable, so they can't really rely on the cloud to give them AI/ML information for timely action. So they needed for low latency applications, they needed something to run at the edge itself. And this is where they have used Snowball Edge to deploy an AI/ML solution from Curious and Mavenir's private 5G stack. And Spark is basically operating this network. What you see there is an example of an AI/ML happening right at the edge with no connection back to the cloud. Now, if you extrapolate this situation, you can say there are multiple other situations, the one we talked about from Telenor, deployment in the port, that is very similar, an AI/ML use case for managing social distancing of people. That was during the COVID times, right? So any application you can think of with AI/ML needs, you can use Snowball Edge, especially when there is, you cannot rely on the network all the time. Now, the other one that I was talking about was the private 5G network in a box, where you have a full 5G core, and you have a private 5G RAN that is from JMA Wireless, and you have space for a multi-access edge compute on the Snowball Edge devices. Now, there is a demo of it in the AWS Industry Showcase in Caesars Palace. And for folks who are in the room, I encourage you to go check out the tent where they have they have a full demo of it working. And you can also get to play with the Snowball Edge devices, you can see how big it is and how rugged it is. Now, again, taking a step back, where are these applications, right? The areas where we are looking for is all the 2-device deployments that are currently going on with private 5G. We are anticipating them to go into the single-device model. You can think of it in the hospitality environment, in education, higher education, manufacturing, automotive. All of these industries, they don't have enough space to basically have this a full rack of supplies. It is much easier for them to deploy a Snowball Edge with radios to manage their private 5G deployments. Now, one of the other use cases that we have is basically on the most of the Snow's intake is with the public sector customers. So Snow has a big intake and also adoption from government customers, and not just within US, within the rest of the world as well. So I wanted to kind of give an idea of the possibility here, right? So Telenor has deployed a Snowball Edge device with a private 5G stack, but it's a two-device solution. There is a RAN stack running on like a secondary server. But the use case that is enabling is for search and discovery with Norwegian Army. So a drone is going around this rugged terrain, streaming video back into the Snowball Edge device. Snowball Edge device has an AI/ML model running on it, which is doing the analytics to detect if there are some people who needs to be rescued. And you can take timely action and send the search and rescue personnel to the right zone rather than just searching all around. Now think of the use case that, how it will unlock for most of the other situations. We have the AWS disaster recovery, team that is looking at a similar use case, where whenever there is a disaster happens, AWS goes and helps out, like we did in Kentucky, like we are doing it with Ian. So wherever they are going, they can set up quickly a private 5G network, and it's with no infrastructure whatsoever, and get their applications running on it within 2 hours or so. And that's the value that Snow brings when you can't rely on reliable connectivity back to the cloud. When you have reliable connectivity, Outpost is almost always is the right answer, right? So because all the capabilities of the cloud is available at the edge to you with the Outpost. But when you do not have connectivity, when you do not know how often the connection is going to get cut, that is when Snow shines. All right. So bringing it all together, right? Amir explained about how AWS is the best place for you to run your 5G workloads. Whether you are running in the cloud on a hyperscaler mode, or whether you are running, on your on-prem with Outposts and Local Zones and Wavelength, or whether you are running in disconnected environments with Snow, right? So we provide the foundational connectivity connections capability. Now, on top of that, we provide the ability to customize your networks, right? In order for you to run your multi-access edge compute. We have full set of tools, CI/CD tools in the cloud, as well as for running it in the edge. So you have all those flexibilities to customize your network for your need, right? Finally, we are building end-to-end solutions. We are making it available for our customers with our managed private 5G networks. And we are also working with our partners such as Swisscom and others to bring in full end-to-end private 5G available for both enterprises as well as for the general public. So there you have it, folks. The key takeaway for all of you is that AWS is the best place for you to run your 5G workloads, whether in the cloud or on the disconnected edge. And if you have any questions, Mark and I will be available in the room to answer them. Thank you.